At 2:17 in the morning, I picked up a call from a man who was whispering so quietly I almost thought it was a prank. He said someone was trying to get into his house. I asked for his address. He gave me one on Black Creek Road. The problem was, there hadn't been a house at that address in almost 20 years. I need to back up a little so this makes sense. I work overnight dispatch in a rural county, the kind of place where the towns are 20 minutes apart and half the roads don't have streetlights. Black Creek Road is one of the worst for that. The first stretch has a handful of occupied houses, porch lights, dogs that bark at nothing. But the farther you go, the more it turns into old farmland. Empty lots, a couple of structures that got condemned or torn down before I was even doing this job. I'd worked that area enough times to know most of the addresses by memory. There was one number, though, that always felt slightly wrong to me. It showed up in some of the older county records, but it wasn't in our current emergency database. I never thought about it beyond a passing, that's odd. Dispatchers develop a weird kind of trivia brain. You remember things you shouldn't. So when the caller gave me that exact address, I assumed he'd misspoken. I asked him to repeat it. He gave me the same number, word for word, digit for digit. I typed it into our system. Nothing came up. No account, no resident, no record of an active structure. I asked him to describe something near the house, a landmark, anything, so I could get a deputy rolling in the right direction even without a clean address. He said there was an old wooden bridge and a sharp bend in the road just before his driveway. That matched. That matched perfectly, actually, which unsettled me more than if it hadn't, because that particular bend only leads to one property, and that property doesn't have a house on it anymore. Then he said something that made my stomach drop in a way I still can't fully explain. He said he could see a police car outside, headlights off. 2 officers standing beside it, just looking toward the house. I checked our CAD system. No units had been dispatched. Nobody was anywhere near that road yet. I got the nearest deputy moving immediately and kept the caller on the line, because that's the job. You don't hang up on someone who's scared, even when your own hands have started to shake a little. He told me the officers hadn't moved. He said they were just standing there. Then he said someone had knocked on his back door and that he hadn't opened it. I told him to stay away from the doors and windows, to keep low, to keep talking to me. A few minutes later, my deputy radioed in. His voice was flat in that particular way cops get when something doesn't line up. He said there was no house at those coordinates, just an overgrown lot, some trees, and the crumbled remains of an old foundation. No vehicles, no lights, no people. And the caller, still whispering, still on the line with me, asked why the officer had just walked away from the house. I froze for a second, because there was no house for the officer to walk away from. There was nothing there but weeds and a foundation. But the caller kept narrating it like he was watching it happen in real time, and the timing lined up with what my deputy was doing out there almost to the second. Then he said the police had left him alone. Then he said, very quietly, that they were coming back. The line went dead. I tried calling the number back. It wouldn't connect, not even to voicemail, like the number had simply stopped existing the moment the call ended. My deputy kept searching the property and eventually found something that made the whole thing worse instead of better. Fresh tire tracks, cutting off the road into the property through a gap in the brush you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it. He followed them to a small clearing farther back in the trees, and there was clearly evidence someone had been staying out there. Food wrappers, bottled water, cigarette butts, a folding chair, a portable battery pack, some clothing balled up under a tarp. No person, though. Whoever it was, they were gone. What really got me was the trail camera. Cheap, the kind you'd buy for $40 to watch a game feeder strapped to a tree and angled directly at the road. My deputy brought it back to the station and we went through the footage together. Most of it was nothing. Empty road, wind-moving branches. But earlier that night, a vehicle had pulled onto the property, partially obscured, but you could make out the shape and the headlights. A few minutes later, it left again. I went back and checked the location data from the original call, mostly out of habit, and that's when it really hit me. The call hadn't come from the old farmhouse property at all. It had pinged from several hundred yards away. Someone had given us that address on purpose, knowing full well nothing was there. Which meant he probably hadn't been hiding in a house being broken into. He'd probably been sitting somewhere nearby, watching my deputy pull up to an empty lot in the middle of the night. I told myself that was the end of it. It wasn't. While we were still reviewing the footage back at the station, another call came in. Same voice, same frightened whisper. But this time he gave a real address, an actual occupied house farther down the road, and said someone was breaking in. I recognized the pattern immediately and kept him talking while we scrambled another deputy out there. That's when it stopped being merely strange and started being something closer to horrifying. He began describing the responding deputy's car before the deputy had even left the station lot. He knew the make. He knew almost to the minute when the deputy turned onto Black Creek Road. There was no way he could have known any of that unless he was watching us in real time, not the house, us. The deputy arrived to find the residents fast asleep. No break-in, nothing out of place. Whoever had made the call was somewhere close by, watching that too. I kept the original caller on the line as long as I could and finally just asked him where he was. He didn't answer right away. Then, very calmly, almost gently, he told me I should probably stop sending them down there. Then he hung up, and this time he didn't call back at all. Officers searched the area for hours and never found him, but they did find a second trail camera, hidden in the brush, angled not at any house but directly down the road itself, pointed at the exact route our patrol cars take every single time we respond to that stretch. After that night, the investigation went nowhere fast. Nobody could figure out who he was or why he'd been doing it, whether it was some kind of sick game, a test of response times, or something else entirely that none of us wanted to think too hard about. I was told not to talk about it while it was still open. Weeks passed, no calls. Eventually it went cold, the way these things do when there's nothing left to follow. I kept working dispatch because that's my job and bills don't care about your nerves. Months went by. I'd almost convinced myself I'd overreacted to the whole thing, that it was just some bored, disturbed person who'd moved on to somewhere else. Then one night, a call came through. No address this time. No panic in his voice at all. None of the whispering fear from before, just calm, flat certainty. He said he knew we'd taken the cameras down. Then the line went quiet, and he was gone. They never found out who he was. But when investigators went back through that old property one more time, they found something that still keeps me up more than anything else about this. There had been a third camera. One nobody had located the first time, tucked down inside the crumbled remains of the farmhouse foundation itself, angled up through a gap in the stone, pointed straight at the road. It wasn't new. The battery inside had corroded almost completely, like it had been sitting there for years, long before any of this started. Someone hadn't just been watching the police that night. They'd been watching that road for a very long time before I ever picked up the phone. And I have absolutely no idea how long they were watching before that camera finally died.